I'd like to call to order Airway Heights Planning Commissioners meeting December 9th, 2020 at 6:01 p.m. Roll call, Commissioner Patel present, Commissioner Shane,
Present.
Commissioner Art,
Here.
Commissioner Mark,
Here.
all present. Pledge of Alliances. This is a tough one. Ready? I pledge
Allegiance
the flag
to the
flag
flag
of
of
the
States of
United
America,
States of America.
and
to the republic for which it stands,
One
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and
justice
justice
for all. I'm using my phone as a, there's the agenda of that. Anybody like to do a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody want to approve the minutes of last meeting?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. We don't have any, do we have any public comments?
I think Zach can just go through if anybody wants to wave their hand or put something into the chat that they want to provide public comment tonight on anything that's not on the agenda. I am not seeing anybody raise their hand or request through the chat to provide testimony. Chair.
If nobody is there, let's move to presentation, which I don't think we have any, so we'll move into the public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing at 6:02 for amendment to AHMC 17.21, parking and loading changes in dimension requirement. And all comments by proponents, opponents, or other members of the public shall be made from raising their hands, in this case, online. I can't even read it, my glasses are not here. Shit. Okay, excuse me. This, if any person is physically challenged and requires special accommodation, the chair shall be advised. No comment shall be made from any location other than the platform. Any person making out of order comments shall be subject to removal from the meeting. I'm gonna go ahead and open the meeting, okay? I
Okay,
don't know.
thank you
I
very
don't
much.
know my glasses.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Chair and Commissioner. This is Heather Troutman with City of Airway Heights Planning Department, and tonight we're doing a public hearing on recommended changes to Airway Heights Municipal Code 1721. This is the chapter of our development standards that speaks to requirements for off-street parking and off-street loading. And what those are requirements for buildings about the amount of parking and loading areas that are used to put product or raw materials on and off trailers, truck trailers that are on a site. So earlier this year, we had a fairly large project come in for a building permit. It was about 187,000 square feet of warehouse area. And during the review of the project, it was found that the city's current loading stall standards were larger than what the project was proposing. Our current standard requires loading spaces to be 15 feet wide. The building was proposing over 50 loading zones because it's predominant use was going to be loading and offloading materials. It's certainly as a warehouse, a distribution facility, that seems very logical. And we were hearing from the project proponents that the standard for truck trailer loading and offloading has changed through time in order to move toward these direct access loading dock to bay door operations. And therefore, because of construction requirements, these types of facilities really require a narrower truck trailer loading stall to go from our current 15 feet down to about 12 feet wide. We began to look at neighboring jurisdictions to see what those requirements are, and found that the city of Spokane Valley and the city of Spokane actually both had a loading width standard narrower than the city of Airway Heights. And so the city agreed to sponsor a text amendment to our development standards to facilitate this smaller standard, allowing for more loading stalls along the loading dock bay. And what we have on the screen is the actual change that we're proposing to the municipal code, which is in chapter 17.21.100, which is required off-street loading. And that is to decrease it from 15 feet down to 12 feet, and the depth of it to go from 60 to 30 feet, but retaining the clearance, the height at 15 feet. So this is exactly the same standard that the city of Spokane Valley has for loading standards. We have workshopped this previously with the Plan Commission on November 12th, and the Plan Commission, you indicated that you were prepared for us to move forward to a public hearing, which is what tonight is about, to hear any testimony from the public about this draft change to our zoning code. We also, per our requirement, circulated this to other agencies, to the State Department of Commerce back on October 16th, in order to kick off a 60-day mandatory review for the code change. And this also went through the State Environmental Policy Act review, all legislative type actions. So ordinances, even text amendments to development standards have to go through an environmental review. And that was completed on November 10th of this year. The next step after this meeting would be to forward the Plan Commission's recommendation to the City Council and have a hearing as required by state law and local ordinance for a change to our development standards. Part of the process is to bring a draft such as this of a text amendment to the Plan Commission, as well as review this proposal under decision criteria found in our municipal code under 1405. And there are 6 decision criteria we're required to analyze any type of application, such as a text amendment or a development application. The first one asks whether or not the proposal is consistent with our newly adopted comprehensive plan that was adopted in June of this year. And staff has found that this is consistent with the comprehensive plan. And one of the major factors is by having a smaller loading zone, we're allowing for more efficient use of a site. And that potentially has reductions of offsite impacts as well as on-site. So more efficient design could mean less pavement, less requirement for stormwater drainage or control for a site, and be able to utilize a site a little bit better. I've included a couple of goals and policies, including goal 7, which establishes types and quantities of land use that promotes efficiency and fiscal responsibility and sustainability, and policy 01, which is supporting land uses that promote compatible and well-developed design. The second criteria for a application such as this is to make adequate provision for open space, drainage, streets, public streets, and transit, water, etc. Now, this is technically a text amendment, and it's analyzed for its overall impact. But in the case of open space or stormwater control or streets, it would actually be a project that would come in utilizing the standard that would be reviewed for those. So in this case, while it's a text amendment, it doesn't directly make provisions for open space, but it could again provide for more efficient use of site because it reduces the width of a loading stall for a tractor trailer or other truck by 3 feet. And when you multiply that across a site, it could be a significant amount of impervious surface that is reduced, and therefore less need for stormwater facility as an example. The third requirement is to mitigate any adverse impacts, and as indicated earlier, we did do a standard SEPA review on this and issued a determination of non-significant. So there's no significant negative impacts as a result of this text amendment. The fourth criteria is that the development would not be harmful to the public health and safety. This text amendment and staff's opinion is not going to be harmful. It actually has to do with more efficient site design and would not increase any likelihood of fire accident or calamity as a result of this text amendment. The fifth criteria is that it doesn't lower levels of service. So if you remember from last couple of meetings, we've talked about what level of service is, and that typically has to do with things like the transportation network, the road network, and whether or not there's slowing of traffic or there's going to be too much traffic put onto a roadway for capacity. And again, as a text amendment, this is not going to directly affect traffic to and from a site on a public roadway. It has to do with where those vehicles end up on a site and how efficiently that site is used. So there is no impacts to level of service as a result of this text amendment. The final criteria is that the location and features of a proposed land use are sufficient. There's dedications that are necessary for the development. And again, this is a text amendment. And we find that having looked at other communities who've had these similar standards, it's a more efficient use of site and would be consistent with our neighboring communities. As a matter of fact, the city of Spokane is an even narrower loading zone width. Actually have gone down to 10 feet instead of the 12 that we're proposing. So with that, there is a recommendation for the Plan Commission to recommend this package, this amendment for changes to 1721 off-street parking and loading to the City Council. And I've included tonight for consideration a draft resolution, which would be Plan Commission Resolution 2020-027. And what is a little bit different about this resolution is to make sure that I went through all of the decision criteria and we identify any findings related to those decision criteria in here, as well as the standard memorialization of the various dates and notices that we've provided to agencies about this proposal. We, of course, have done the public notice and the Cheney Free Press for tonight's hearing as well, so that there's adequate notice to the public about the proposed changes. So I have included as well a full version of our parking and loading chapter, so you can see the full text of the code. And really, we're just concentrating on just one small section, which is specific to the width of the loading zone. So if you're curious or have questions about the amendment or about the rest of the chapter, I'm certainly available for questions from the Plan Commission.
I don't have any questions.
Well, that concludes the staff presentation for this evening, and I will hand this back over to the chair
Thank you.
to open up the public hearing for any public testimony.
Do we have anybody signed up for public comments on this on this subject? Zach? Is there anybody signed up to speak or open up?
No, the only member, well, non-member of the city here is Jamie. So Jamie, if you have nothing, then we can move on. Okay.
Well, if we don't have anybody from the public to comment, I'd like to close the public hearing at using the phone today, sorry.
It's 6:14.
6:14 p.m. And I'd like to open up the discussion with the planning commissioners if anybody want to comment on this.
No, I have no comments.
No. So if there's no more comments, I would like to recommend moving the motion for resolution 2020-027 to the city council.
Yeah, I'll move to approve resolution PC 2020-027.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, all in favor. So the public hearing is closed now. I mean, that's right. We're gonna move to action items. Draft letter to the city council on impact to emergency service by growth. And I would like to open that. Heather?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll just put the draft up on the screen for everyone. And thank you, by the way, for a quick discussion of loading stalls. I know it's not as maybe as interesting as some of the other hearings you've had over the last couple of months, but we promised a light agenda for you tonight. This is an item from your last meeting that was sparked by a discussion on the Hunters Crossing preliminary plat. And the Plan Commission asked for a letter to be drafted on your behalf addressed to the City Council that identified that there appears to be impacts to our public safety partners as a result of growth in our community. And per that conversation, invited Mitch Metzger, the Chief of Fire for the City of Airway Heights, and Bradley Richmond, the Chief of Police for Airway Heights, to be engaged in the development of this letter. And I believe that Chief Bradley is here. Yes, or Chief Richmond. I always call you Chief Brad. Chief Richmond is here this evening, and it looks like we also have our City Administrator, Albert, is here as well. If there's any questions or discussions about the letter, the goal was to review the letter and potentially see if there were any edits or changes and take action to authorize Cal Patel as the chair of the Plan Commission to sign the letter and forward it to the City Council requesting a joint commission meeting for discussion of impacts of our to our community by growth to our public safety group.
Should I open it up for discussion first, or should I run a motion first? Stuff.
It would be up to you.
I would
Chief, did you
prefer,
want to speak to any of the information that's in here, or did you have questions for the chief?
well, I read the letter this morning and I think it's well formatted and thought out. And I think both the departments, fire and police, both have their concerns outlined in this document. So if they want to add anything to this letter, we can do that. Or if they're okay with it, then I think discussing with the planning commissioner, we could probably approve it to move forward.
Yeah, I was pleased with the letter. I think it met the items we were trying to reach. I mean, we had quite the discussion last meeting on this, and it's quite an impact if we, especially with the sprinkler part of it, to add that in. So it's something I think we should need to have a bigger discussion on, decide which route we want to go, and we do need to look at these issues with the fire and the police that are going to be coming up with the increase of housing in this area. So.
I agree, and I support the potential meeting with all of us around to discuss it. I think it's fine.
That's gonna reflect the same sentiments as everyone else on the commission.
Heather, good job on the letter, by the way.
Yeah.
Well written.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, all the credit goes to our two chiefs. They know their subject very well. I just made a couple, little graph and plugged
But
it together.
it's a well thought out document, so.
Agreed.
Thank you.
So if nobody has any further discussion, I'd like to get a motion to approve this letter to move to the city council.
I'll
I
make
would
a
so
motion.
move.
Oh, who was first?
Doesn't matter.
All right,
Art was first, and who made the second?
I'll second it.
Mark.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
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 All in favor.
Oh, thank you very much.
What do we have? We have a workshop for you, Heather. We'll move to the workshop. I'll sign the letter and send it to you tomorrow.
Yes, well, yeah, that'd be great. Perfect, thank
I'll do
you.
it in the morning tomorrow. I'd like to move to the workshop proposed 2020 zoning map. Zach?
Yeah, let me get this up here real quick. Bathed in orange. Let's see.
Okay, Zach's getting that up.
Oh, you got rid of the uncomfortable raceway symbol.
You know, I wasn't gonna put it that way, but
Touche.
Heather, whenever you're ready.
You're sharing your screen.
Okay. So I'm gonna start, Heather. If you want to jump in at any point, feel free. So again, this is a workshop. It's not a public hearing, so all of this is still up in the air. So we're just having conversation right now, essentially. And if we want to recommend it towards a public hearing at the end, that's something you guys are, okay with doing. So we're going to talk about the City of Airway Heights zoning map amendments that we are proposing. And I will make sure I can switch slides. There we go. So why are we amending the zoning map? So the City of Airway Heights is required to plan under the GMA, which is the Growth Management Act. I'm sure all of you are aware of what's going on with the Growth Management Act. Requirements for planning can be found under RCW 36.7A040, and in that section, which is subsection 4D, the county and city, any city that is located within the county shall adopt a comprehensive plan and development regulations that are consistent with and implement the comprehensive plan no later than 4 years from the date the county legislation authority adopts its resolution of intent, and so on and so forth. So essentially, our main goal here is to ensure that our zoning is consistent with our land use map, which was a part of our comp plan. So number one, that's the goal, is to ensure consistency with the 2020 future land use map. I'm going to pull that up here in a second as we go through, so you'll get a chance to see that as well. There are additional goals when we developed this draft. One was to ensure that tribal trust lands are up to date as of 2020. When we were going through the comprehensive plan adoption process, the Kalispel tribe, that's something that they had asked us to do to ensure that their tribal trust lands were as up to date as possible. And these are as up to date as of November of this year, so last month. Minimizing floating zoning wherever possible. Floating zoning is essentially any zone that does not align with a parcel. So there are areas in the city where we have zoning that exists that does not follow a parcel line. Some of these areas have been adjusted. Some of them they're not. So we'll go through those one by one, but that's one of the goals I had, was to try to align parcel lines with our zoning. Combining maps for ease of use. Specifically on our current zoning map, which we're going to talk about in just a second, the 2018, we do not have the mixed use overlay. And after working with developers for the past year, the mixed use overlay is something that's almost mythical. There is a map of the mixed use overlay within our code, but it's not very easy to read, and it's kind of hard to find. So unless you know what you're looking for, it's hard to find. So having the mixed use overlay on our zoning map hopefully will encourage more mixed use development throughout the city. Updating map with the latest parcel data from Spokane County. So we want to make sure our zoning map, again, trying to tie it in with the parcel layer as much as possible. And our current zoning map doesn't necessarily have all the parcel data. It has some data on it that isn't even parcel data. So trying to stay as close to that as we can is one of our goals. Correcting errors and ensuring that areas that have been rezoned between 2018 and now are accurate and up to date. There are some areas on the 2018 zoning map that are actually different because they have, between the publishing of that and now, have been rezoned. So those can be confusing. So we want to make sure, we're correcting any errors that were made and also updating every parcel that has been zoned and rezoned. Providing easily accessible zoning and land use data for our community. That's more of a design goal, but also, an accessibility goal. Eventually, we're hoping to have our zoning layer, pretty close to, after it's published, be available in a digital format, so we can click and go around and it won't be a static map, and that will be the only thing. We want to make it as easily accessible as possible for anyone who wants to see it. So those are our goals. So this is our current 2018 zoning map. It was adopted in 2018. It displays future parcel data. So portions of this map weren't actually platted, specifically up in this region here in the northwest corner, kind of where Hunter's Crossing is going in Highland Village. Some of that data was placed on this map, so that isn't it, those aren't parcels. So that's something in the new map we're gonna try and not do as much. Includes zoned areas that do not follow parcel lines due to limitations of GIS. If you get into the nitty gritty, there are certain areas that it gets kind of messy the closer you get to it. And that's just more because the technology when this was developed, there was a lot of just kind of drawing over stuff. So we're going to try and clean that up as much as possible. This does not show the mixed use overlay, which I just spoke about, which is going to be in here, and we'll see that here in our new draft. Feedback from the public indicated that the colors, especially in the residential zones, were too close to distinguish from one another. So specifically up here in some of the residential zones, so these blues, we've had feedback from the public saying, oh, I thought I was in an R1 and actually I'm in an R2. There will be another good example of that as we go down, because not only the public, but we had some internal issues with that as well. So trying to make it as easily, easy to read as possible is another goal. So it's not updated or kept current. Again, that's the difference between having a static map and also having something dynamic where we can go in and update the data as it comes in and have it available in a digital format. So that's another goal of ours. Okay, so this is the 2020 future land use map. So this map was adopted as part of the 2020 comprehensive plan. So that was earlier this year. I'm sure all of you remember that process. It includes all parcel data that's accurate to the time of publication. So parcel data is, finicky isn't the right word. It changes all the time. A good example of when I was in school, we all did a project on a parcel layer and half of us got something different than the other half because they picked up a copy of the parcel layer 2 weeks later. Like just that amount of time can cause an issue because this thing is changing. It's a living being. So this map was, I believe, originally late last year, I believe, Heather, is that when this first?
No, I think the data was last pulled in May of 2020.
Okay, so it's been, a little bit, and even then we'll see a change that has happened since then. So again, keep that in mind. We're always changing. So they did a good job of minimizing the floating land uses as much as possible. So similar to floating zoning, certain areas like down here that have had zoning that wasn't aligned with the parcel layer, they went ahead and aligned it with the parcel. So the idea of making sure those were as consistent as possible was in this process as well. As you can see, this map does include the mixed use overlay, which is right here. And you'll see that continue into the 2020 draft. Shows accurate sound contours and APZ zones. So that's obviously important to everyone who's looking at zoning because the APZ and sound contours have developmental implications for anyone trying to build in Airway Heights. So we want to make sure those are there and as accurate as possible. Displays future and current land uses and not zoning. So that's an important determination. Is this, obviously it's not a zoning map. It's showing what is actually going on or what is going to be going on within these areas. So let's go. And here is the proposed 2020 zoning map. So again, this was developed using the 2020 future land use map and designations as a guide. As I said earlier, one of the reasons these zoning changes are triggered is that we have to be consistent with that 2020 land use map. So that's where we started. This displays the most current parcel data as of November 2020. That's when I started developing the map. So like I said, parcels are dynamic. So once you take a snapshot, it's there forever. So since I've even done this, there's probably been some changes, maybe not in Airway Heights, but somewhere in Spokane County, the layer is actually already different. Minimize floating zoning as much as possible. I've talked about that a couple times, so I'm not going to do it again. And as you can see, the mixed use overlay is included here. Again, it shows those accurate sound contours and the colors, especially between the residential and also the commercial areas. I tried to differentiate them a little bit so you can tell the difference between the R2 or the R1, the R2 and the R3 a little more. And the C1, which all of our C1 is actually in the mixed use overlay. So it's kind of lined up a little bit there, and also the C2 and the C2 and the non-mixed use overlay. So I'm going to go over some of the areas where we made some specific changes. If you guys have any questions or comments, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind the workshop. So feel free to stop me, or if you want to wait till the end, that's cool as well. But just, you know, go for it if you need to. So this is Raceway Recreation. Sean made a comment on this earlier. And essentially what we did was we adjusted the recreational zoning here. So this is what it looks like in the 2018 zoning. This is what the land use looks like in the 2020 land use. So this piece here is actually the raceway. And instead of following the parcel line, which is right here, they decided to follow, you know, specifically the raceway. So what we did was we expanded that recreational zoning to include the entire parcel. So this is what the zoning looks like on our proposed 2020 map. So the recreation actually follows the parcel line with the exception of this guy here. This is actually part of that parcel, but I want to limit floating zoning, but you know, at some point we have to have some. The important part of that is for that to remain I1, so we can make sure that they can build infrastructure there without having an issue with that. There's also a sliver parcel, which we had conversations about when we were looking at it. And when I say sliver parcel, I mean kind of a small, skinny parcel that isn't necessarily something you could do any significant development on, but it's still a parcel and it's still owned. And specifically, I'm talking about this guy right here. I don't know if you guys can see that, it's kind of hard, but it's essentially, this is the Department of Corrections here. And then this is the sidewalk. So that sidewalk itself is its own parcel. It's not, actually, I believe it is owned by the Department of Corrections, but we haven't identified it within our future land use. So it is going to remain an industrial zone. We are proposing to shift it over to I2 since the I1, since the I1 was essentially here. So it was connecting right there. But since there's no I1 connecting over here at all, we're just gonna have it I2 to remain consistent here. Northwest Residential. So this is one of the bigger areas where we have some changes. We adjusted the parcel layer to be as accurate as possible. So this is a zoom in of that area where I was referring to earlier, where there were some on the 2018 map, some of this actually doesn't exist. It was drawn in there for one reason or another. This is what the parcel layer actually looks like. So this is what we have in our map, but this is all hypothetical essentially. So this is the accurate parcel layer, and this is how this translated zoning, which is essentially a mirror of this with some exceptions down here. So the future land use was proposed by Hunters Crossing during the 2020 comprehensive plan. So the zoning up here was the proponent was Hunters Crossing to get that zone that way. There is an open space zone, which on the here it's marked here, but it's actually here. That's where they're putting the park in for Highland Village. So we want to keep that open space. There's also the some arrow leaf zoning in here. So this is all consistent with areas that have already been rezoned. What was the last thing I wanted to say on this? Oh yes. So again, I know I've talked about removing floating zoning, but there are areas up here that are purposely rezoned. One area being this little R2 guy here. So that's not a parcel, that's just a floating zoning layer. And this kind of looks bad in terms of like from a design standpoint. I guess bad is a poor choice of words. It doesn't follow the parcel line. That is intentional, and that was done during the Hunters Crossing amendment. So we are keeping that consistent with their amendment. And please stop me if you have anything to say. I'm going. So the RM residential. So all manufactured homes on individual lots will be converted to R1 single family from RM manufactured housing. So this is a bigger picture piece here. The RM zone is essentially being limited to trailer parks. So any single family lot, so all of these purple in here that are zoned RM but have single units on them are converting to R1. Major reason behind that is we are in the process of also doing a text amendment that is required by the GMA. So one of the pieces we are required to do is to make sure that manufactured homes are a permitted use within the R1. So we're converting all of the RMs to the R1s that fall within there, but keeping the RM zoning for any multi-unit parks. In this case, there's only one, and it's located right here. This is actually the same parcel, even though they're physically separated. They're legally the same parcel, and that's only to the north of US 2. All of the RM zoned parcels to the south of US 2 we'll be talking about here in just a moment. Let's see here. Yes, and also I touched on Arrowleaf a little bit here too, but that's what's going on in here. So all of those little changes were due to Arrowleaf's rezone. So this is that stuff that, again, I kind of talked about, the cleanup. This is stuff that has already happened that we're just now adding to the map. So the APZ, RM, and the post office. So there are 2 changes in this area. The RM manufacturer housing rezone parcels to I2. This is something we had a lot of conversations about. We, as in us internally, and also the planning commission, about these RM zone parcels down here that are located within the APZ. So they are identified within the comp plan as being industrial, and we're rezoning them to be I2. This is mainly to open up uses within those areas. Since residential development is not allowed within the APZ, we want to make sure that land is open and available to use as much as possible, and this was the solution. So the rezone is to remain consistent with that comp plan change. The post office, which is this guy right here, is currently zoned public, but we are actually rezoning it to an, I'm sorry, is it R1? Or C1, I'm sorry. So C1 limited commercial, to be consistent with everything around it. The main reason behind that is because that building is actually privately owned. So since it's not a government owned building, the possibility of a lease change or whatever could happen, we don't want to limit the owners of the building's availability to do anything with it because it's zoned public, so it's not government owned. So those are the big changes on this guy, or this guy, and this guy. So here, and here. Southside recovery well, this is a really simple one. So there's a parcel containing a city-owned recovery well that's zoned I2 to public. Big reason was the parcel didn't exist on the 2018 map. So when we brought the new parcel layer in, it's now parceled out right here. So we're essentially just being consistent with the 2020 future land use map here. So the change is to no to yes, but it is a city-owned recovery well. Tribal trust land, I mentioned this earlier. So parcels identified as being in tribal trust. Every single one, I believe, that was not in trust in 2018. So this guy, some of these guys down here, you can kind of see them here. I believe they're all C2. So all of those C2s are converting over to tribal zoning because they have been put in trust since 2018. So, and again, that was at the request of the Kalispell Tribe of Indians. Okay. So this one's kind of weird. It's, again, it's a previous rezone that wasn't represented on the 2018 map. So we're essentially just adding zoning information that has changed between 2018 and 2020. Part of this was actually missed on the 2020 future land use map. So it's this parcel here was essentially a short plat process was put in to subdivide it here. It's actually has a third parcel on it now. So this bottom piece here is what happened. This was identified as industrial, but the zoning, the rezone's already been completed through a short plat process. So I'm essentially correcting an error on that one to make sure this whole thing is zoned in the R2. All right, last one, guys. So this is probably the biggest one on here, and this is the one we're probably going to need the most feedback on. And this was due to a mapping error. A portion of Sunset Crossing. So Sunset Crossing, I'm sure all of you know where that's at, was identified as single family on the 2020 land use map. So right here. So you got Second Tower, you got Russell Street running along here. So the DOC is right in this area here. So this area, it's actually zoned R2. But again, we talked about that map, the color differentiation having issues, and the map makers had, it appears that they didn't identify that as duplex. So they went ahead and made it single family. So for now, we have it in the 2020 zoning as converting to R1 to be consistent with the 2020 land use map. But that's something that we would really appreciate your feedback on. So. Okay, guys, that's all of the changes we are proposing. I know it's a lot, and I know it was kind of, in the weeds there, but I appreciate you listening. And if you have any questions or comments, we'd really appreciate some direction.
Zach, is there anything in the zoning that drastically will impact the citizens of Airway Heights?
I think, I mean, the biggest impact I think is going to be this guy. Drastically, I don't know. Heather, what do you think?
I don't think it would be a significant impact because that subdivision was already developed and filled in with detached single-family homes.
Yes.
The advantage that they had during the building permits at those times is they would have met the setback requirements for the duplex zone versus the R1 single family. But from a use standpoint, it's not my understanding that any of those lots would result in a non-conforming use because they were built as single family, which is a permitted use in the R1. And that was one of the predominant reasons why we've recommended being consistent with the comprehensive plan and retaining an R1 single family zone to reflect what was built.
And the other probably biggest change that we're proposing it's already been adopted through the comp plan would be those RMs on the south side converting over to I2s. And from a land use perspective and a planning perspective, that only opens up options for people to use those parcels. Right now, I've talked to, 20 different people about those in the past 3 months. I get calls about them all the time, and it's really hard to say, well, they're zone residential, but you can't build any residential you can't develop. So this would allow, a plethora of additional uses to go on there. So I don't see that as being a negative effect. I see that as being a really positive effect.
I mean, that needs to be changed. That was part of was it Highland? That's part, or which one of those areas up there was to compensate for that switch?
That was
Yeah.
the Highland Village.
Highland, yeah.
They did receive an R3 rezone between the 2018 zoning map and present. So Highland Village and Arrowleaf both had rezones in the last 2 years, which are now being updated to be reflected on the 2020 zoning map. And then finally, the Hunter's Crossing comprehensive plan changes to go from low density to medium density would be implemented in this as well. And those are very, very accurate depictions that Zach has put onto the zoning map because they gave us legal descriptions. And I'm not sure why they left, a 1/10 of an acre out or included a 1/10 of an acre in some of these land use designations, but we're able to be that accurate now because we are creating a system and Zach is developing GIS for us.
Nice.
Zach, one more question. As far as the RM zoning is concerned, you only have that little parcel right now, right? The one you showed earlier? That one, yeah. That's the only location in the whole city.
For now, yeah. We're maintaining the RM zone in a sense of for future development. So for now, that would be the only parcel. But again, if we maintain it, that's something that we could do at a later point. We don't want to get rid of it completely.
All right, thank you.
Well, didn't you say that you're going to allow RM in or manufactured homes in R1?
Sure. So the difference between those two would be on a single lot versus multiple units on one lot. So
Okay.
the RM zone is going to be maintained as essentially a park. So you can have a bunch of different units on one parcel, but all of these have a single double wide or something similar to that on them. So we're now treating them as single family.
Zach, can you go back to the 2020 proposed zoning map?
Sure.
So, I mean, you all have been in different parts of our community and realized that there actually are parks, mobile home parks throughout the city. But most of the ones that were created are actually on Highway 2 and South. So existing ones were already zoned commercial, C2 commercial, and they'll remain C2 commercial. So the ones that you see immediately south of US 2 on the east and the west end will remain C2. We're not proposing any changes. And then the only one that we found on the north side that appeared to have been approved as a mobile home park is the one that's proposed to remain within the mobile home park zone, the RM zone. So our goal was not to create non-conforming uses, because as you know, there are a number of mobile homes and manufactured homes, and the difference there has to do with the age and then the HUD seal on them that are throughout the community, and you know they're allowed, and by state law we're required to continue allow manufactured homes of certain age and certain size to go on any single family lot that's permitted in our zoning.
I have a question. Will you share your GIS data with the county for the scout map? Or do you guys do that?
You know, I need to talk to them. To be completely honest, I would like to. If it makes it easier for everyone to access, then absolutely. The big problem, well, it's not necessarily, well, I'm gonna try. Because the big thing with our parcel layer is if we have floating zoning. So we have, you know, zones that don't necessarily align with parcel layers, it gets kind of complicated. So what I would like to do is to try and make those two work. But I believe Scout actually uses zoning as its own independent layer. So I really need to talk to them. So I don't have I'd like to, I guess is my best answer.
So in theirs, you can do the drop down and look at what their zoning is. So I figured, you know, it would be an easy kill to have your zoning in there as well, perhaps. But it does make it harder to maintain because you have to update them every time you update something. So.
So we would provide that data, but we are not in a position to control what they put up or how often that they update it. And so the hazard, having worked in this area for 25 years, is that we would never encourage anybody to go to the county to get accurate zoning information. They should always go to the local jurisdiction to find the most accurate information on what the zone is, because it really can, because of that lag or their policy about what they put up can create, you know, difficulty for property owners. I've seen multiple times people buy property based on descriptions in the assessor's records that were not reflective of accurate zoning. And we had the unfortunate task of letting people know that they wouldn't be able to develop in the way that they thought because they looked at the county layer. Now, we have agreements out there to exchange data on a, you know, more frequent basis, but it would just be a courtesy. Our overall goal, Jamie, is that we're going to launch our own publicly accessible GIS system. So it would be a map that would have multiple layers that would be constantly updated on the city's website, and it would include other information like, you know, where water lines, where sewer lines, you know, information about zoning history eventually, so that you could, you know, click on a parcel and you'd find out when it was zone changed, or, you know, what the file number, or, you know, if there was a conditional use permit, when it was issued, etc. So it would be more complete, hopefully in the future, from our website.
Sounds good.
Hey, the housing development that you showed on 4th Avenue that goes from R1 to R2 for the duplexes, if they were to renovate or change anything, would they have to conform to the R1 standard then?
With regards to a setback, if they were to put an addition on, then the addition would meet the R1 setback standards.
Okay. Thank you, Heather.
Mm-hmm. But for most application, the development standards between the R1 and the R2 are nearly identical, from parking requirements to, you know, what you're allowed to do for buildings. Probably the biggest difference between the R1 and the R2 has to do ultimately with lot size. And since this area has already been subdivided, they wouldn't be able to go any smaller. But those are probably some of the only differences between the two zones.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, setback coverages, max height, parking, but those are all like, so it would be 100%.
So I have a question that I've had over the years and never gotten a great answer, but now maybe I'll be able to get one. The APZ, I assume, refers to the landing zone where the planes come in to go to the Air Force area, correct?
Yeah, no, sorry.
So APZ stands for Accident Potential Zone. So basically, it's a calculation that the DoD makes, and they say, you know, a certain percentage, you know, the highest percentage of aircraft mishaps happen in the clear zone, which is closer to the base. And then we have APZ1, which, you know, is a little less of a percentage than the clear zone, but higher. And then not, and then the APZ2 is lower risk, but still risk for accidents.
Okay, I agree. I understand that, but it
Okay.
still refers to
Yeah,
an
of course.
area where planes would be coming in and through to land at the base.
Correct. It's the landing. It's how they come in to land and take off.
Okay, so I'm a little confused then, because there have been and still continued landing approaches that are not in that APZ area. For instance, they come from the north down over the recreational park, crossing over First Avenue and continuing on, crossing over then Sunset School. That's nowhere represented that I see. So help me understand that.
So I can show you what all the different flight patterns are for the pilots, because they fly different patterns for different missions. So
I agree. And a year ago, I was told, not by you, but the other gentleman that was representing the force, that he would give me an update. I just don't understand, if we have an APZ, but we have planes landing in different areas, I mean, coming in from different areas, how does that look? No one's ever clarified that. And maybe I misunderstood, but I'm just saying.
If I can maybe help with that, Art, the accident potential zone is an area that they are doing final approach, and they're doing initial exiting from. And Jamie, of course, is our community planner from Fairchild Air Force Base. If you have really detailed questions. And what I wanted to point out is the sound contours you see on the map, Art,
Yeah.
those represent actual flight paths. And I think that's what you're referring to. These are actually flight paths from some older aircraft taken from some 1995 data. But as Jamie indicated, they can show or provide to the Plan Commission even more current flight data. And the difference is there's a higher statistical probability of a crash in APZ1 and APZ2, but the other markings on this map are indicating that it also is a flight area and path, but it also has other potential dangers. And in this case, this overlay zone that we're depicting here is intended to reflect where we've consciously restricted use. because of the high incidence of, or a more likely incident, I guess, of accident, as well as the impacts of sound by the aircraft. So you have to think of this as not just a single linear representation of potential accident, but that all of these numbers and figures represent an overall flight area where we, through our 1716 of our municipal code, adopted something called the Joint Land Use Study, or JLUS, and we agreed to restrict density, and we restricted use because of the overall number and type of approaches that Jamie mentioned. Is that helpful?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And that's okay. We don't get bogged down here on it. I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to me, but that's my problem.
I can say that this was negotiated, Art, and that the mission before and after this was monumented in an ordinance has changed, and that you're right in your observation that there are flights occurring in different ways than the way that this was monumented. So similar to what Zach said about parcels, a code is, and the information we have here is what we've adopted at that time, and it does apply in the future for purposes of land use.
Hey, Art, I know like in my time working on Army airfields, and I don't know compared to Air Force airfields, when they would go into emergency situations, they had to follow certain procedures, and that was part of the landing was part of that procedure. So it could very well be the Air Force is saying when they land during an emergency that they're going right through that area because that's the safest area for the plane to land. And that's why it makes it a higher statistical odd for an accident.
Still doesn't make sense.
So I think that pilots have to train to come into the airfield at different angles,
Agreed.
that they can, learn those maneuvers before they have to do that in the real world. I think that's part of it. It's part of the training. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, but it doesn't, in my head, that doesn't correlate to where the APZ is represented when I see planes landing completely different ways.
Well, I think what Art's getting confused on is the difference between the APZ and the sound contours. The sound contours are based on really old data. The flight paths have changed, obviously. They're coming over the neighborhoods now where those sound contours should probably be updated because the 6570 probably should be moved over towards the housing because they do fly over the houses. But even though they're flying over the houses there, they're still, their greatest risk for crashing is going to be in the APZ areas because that's when they're powering down, they're coming into land, or taking off. That's their most risk. But the sound contours are just noise issues. They're not crash zones, where the APZs are crash zones. So I think there's a difference between the two different lines.
They are still an area of potential accident, which is why we've taken information that's in the zoning code and try to represent it on the zoning map, because it's something that property owners and potential owners are not aware of, that we have agreed to additional development limitations and person per acre density limitations in these areas. And so let me give you an example. If you see red on this map, what we've already adopted is that there is no residential, no exception allowed anywhere where there's red here. And that's on purpose because those are in sound contours. And it's almost a misnomer that we call it sound contour. It is actually part of a flight path, and it does, in the way we've adopted it, convey that there's a risk of accident. So intentionally, everything that's red no longer can have residential uses at all. The hatched area that looks pink on this map through the core is an area that under the current code, through a hearings examiner conditional use permit, limited residential is allowed. In the areas that are 70 to 75, our zoning code has even greater limitations on the uses that can go there. So no medical facilities would be allowed. So no dentist's office, no acupuncture, massage therapy, no clinic would be able to go there. And these standards were adopted in order to reduce risk to public safety and to ensure base compatibility by not having uses within the flight area that would essentially impact the ability for Fairchild to have effective missions. So that is kind of the kernel behind the zoning map update, is we're trying to bring some of this information forward because Zach and I field questions every day because people don't understand that we've actually adopted a pretty significant zoning overlay in Airway Heights that conveys additional requirements above and beyond sound mitigation in buildings.
Okay, I'll let it go. It's fine.
Jamie, if I could ask, maybe if you or Jeff would be willing to come back to a plan commission meeting and do a presentation on the flights and the differences between the flight routes, and that would be certainly up to the plan commission if you'd like to have that as part of a future meeting.
I think that's a great idea. I think it will answer a lot of questions.
It might, and it would be helpful also for me, because I'm old, if the map could be blown up a little bit, or I can move around on it, because I can tell where Highway 2 is, but nothing else as far as roads.
We can send that to you between now and that hearing, Art, and it is designed so that you can do exactly that. You can move around and you can zoom in.
That would be really helpful.
And Zach was very, very conscientious to make sure that that it's scalable. So as you zoom in and out, the names of the roads will continue to be visible, which is a hazard when you zoom out too far, for example.
Sure.
And if you zoom in, you can see parcels. So that's the benefit of a geographic information system, is the dynamic ability and the usability, because we can add additional layers, but we'll make sure and send that map out to you. I do want to thank Zach very much, because this is a huge step forward for Airway Heights to have that kind of resource for the commissioners, the council, and for the public. And of course, for staff in the future, it'll make it so much easier for people to understand what they'll be able to do on their property.
Yeah, and I agree. It's a huge job. The reference to the APZ, the landing and all that, that's a side issue. It's not what you're presenting as far as this. So thank you.
And Art, there is a PDF version of this map that was included within your packet. If you want to look at it right now, that is pretty zoomable. The resolution on this is pretty high, so you should be able to go in and out without having any issues.
I can do that later, but thank you.
Sure.
Well, great questions. Great questions. And we're hoping that as we come forward to public hearing on the zoning map, that we'll have addressed a lot of your questions and made sure that this map is very understandable, because that's the point of it, is for the consumer, for the commission, the city council, the public, other team members, our partner agencies, be able to look at this and understand what's going on.
Great.
Anybody have any comments or questions? If we don't, I think we should move this to public hearing. When will the public hearing be, in January?
Yeah.
I don't know if Art has any questions prior to that on the APZ effects
No,
or
that's
anything.
No,
Well,
I'm good.
All right.
Unfortunately, I can't adjust the APC, so it
No,
is.
it's just that if you had any concerns or questions, I would ask the Air Force to do a little presentation for us to address some of the issues, if that's possible. But if there's no concerns, then I guess we can move this to the public hearing for next month.
That'd be fine.
Anybody want to do a motion?
I'll move it. Sure.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Good work, Zach.
Yeah, good job.
Let's move on to commissioner's report. Anybody have any comments or any?
Just Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
That'll work.
Likewise, that's good.
I agree.
That's about all I have.
Heather, if we can get an update of what's coming in the city next month as far as new development or any new permits that have been approved, it would be nice for us to see what's happening.
You like that tonight?
No, next meeting's fine. January, so we can start the year knowing what's happening in the city.
Well, I could do that tonight as part of the staff report if you like.
If it doesn't take too long, yes. No more comments from any commissioners? No.
I just
Let's
want to
move-
say, Cal,
Oh.
Merry Christmas as well. Happy New Year. It's been a great year despite all the challenges we've had.
Hey, we had a good team. We have a great team. Staff have done a great job this year. A lot of stuff has moved through this committee, and I think we have a great team, and I hope we continue the same work next year. And Happy New Year, Happy Christmas to everybody.
Happy holidays. Thank you very much. And that sounded like a challenge, Cal.
Cal said he wants to get the Pledge of Allegiance right the first time in 2021.
That's so hard to do on Zoom.
Maybe Zach can rig up on Zoom one of those little moving dots, remember from school, and you sang along.
Nice.
Maybe we can synchronize that way.
I mean, I can just stream a YouTube video and we could just watch it. I mean, we could be creative. Yes.
So I'm happy to do a presentation for Fairchild. I don't know if you guys know, but Jeff was in an accident and he was injured pretty bad, so he'll be out of pocket for a while.
Not good.
Oh no, I had not heard that. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, yeah, he has had like 4 surgeries for broken bones, and he broke both of his ankles and one of
Ow.
his legs and
Oh, no.
his pelvic leaves. It's bad. Yeah. So, but I'm happy to do a presentation for you guys, or just put a couple slides together for you guys to present. I'm either way. And I'll get with my airfield operations people and make sure that I have some good information for you guys so that you understand it as well as I can explain it.
That would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yep, that sounds great.
Staff reports. Thank you, Jamie.
Let's see. For development that's coming up, we are anticipating the remainder of the Hunter's Crossing land to come in for preliminary plat and planned unit development. That would be about another 40 acres of area. They're presently working on a traffic plan to identify the scope of their traffic study. We also have commented on a proposed urban growth area boundary modification that would be north of Deer Heights and US 2, adjacent to the existing city limits. That is going, I believe it's going through the review process by the Spokane County Board of Commissioners. It's 180 acres of land that's proposed to be exchanged with part of Airway Heights urban growth area that includes the Spokane County off-road vehicle area, which is north of Highland Village. So it'd be a swap of the same land use designation of rural traditional in the county for about 180 acres. So we're waiting to receive notice of when the County Plan Commission will hold a hearing on that proposed UGA modification. We also potentially could see some additional area develop on the east side of Airway Heights in the industrial. We've been receiving some inquiries with regards to mining as well as additional warehousing activity that could be coming into our area. And we, as you know, have been working with the Kalispell tribe to complete the developer agreement for the proposed R3 rezone that's at 10th and Garfield. It's about 28 acres that they're proposing to be residential, up to 10 units per acre, combination of single family, two family, fourplexes, townhome development on 28 acres in that location. So those are some of the projects that have either we're working on agreements or we're already working with their project proponents on elements of what would be an application coming in 2021. Any questions about some of those projects?
No.
No.
Heather, I had a question. Last meeting we were discussing about Hunter's Crossing in reference to the fire department's concern, and then we moved the thing to the city council. Has the city council acted on that?
That will go to hearing on December 21st.
Okay. I'd like to know what, I should attend the meeting, but it's a December 21st meeting?
It's December 21st at 5:30. There are quite a few things on the agenda, Kels. You might want to get comfortable, because I believe in addition to Hunter's Crossing hearing for the preliminary plat, there's also the budget hearing.
Oh.
And we have the concurrency ordinance that you passed forward, as well as the C2 cannabis ordinance that you passed forward, are all on that evening.
No, I would be very curious to see how they address the issue.
There are two preliminary plats for that meeting now, Heather.
That's right. There was a preliminary plat that you reviewed in the summer of 2019 for Traditions West and recommended move forward to city council. So that will be presented to the council on the 21st with your recommendation.
Okay.
That was very gently said, Heather.
I was using sign language during a meeting yesterday, so.
Nice.
As long as they're all appropriate, I guess that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's all interpretation, right? Thanks, Art.
Yeah, gotta add a little.
Anybody have any comments or anything before we adjourn for tonight?
No, good
I do
meeting.
not.
All right. If there's no further objections or any comments, with the meeting adjourns at 7:12 p.m.
What happened to our bags?
Stay online. Stay
That's
online.
after
Stay
adjournment.
online. Zach's
Oh,
gonna
all right.
turn the recording off because
I
you've
mean, I've
adjourned
just
your
been
meeting.
waiting.
And he's gonna turn off the share screen. There
All
we go.
right.
Well, this is the fun part. Night, Jamie.